Hello, guys, and welcome back to this new episode. This time around, we are going to discuss pederastry in ancient Greece. It's probably what nowadays we would compare to pedophilia, but there is a huge difference between the two, and at least in the way it was perceived. Pederastry is defined as a socially acknowledged romantic relationship between an older male and a younger male, usually in his teens. Now, yes, that is disgusting to us because we have a very precise concept of pedophilia, but also keep in mind that pederastry in ancient Greece was not pedophilia in ancient Greece. Even for an ancient Greek man, was impossible to touch infants, meaning young female and men below the age of 12. Now, when we mention the age of 12, we also need to keep in mind that at the age of 14, 15, there were men who were, and here I would say more or less capable of actually come into power and become emperor. And a typical example of that is Heliogabalus, and he was Syrian and actually took power in ancient Rome at the age of 14. Actually dressed up like a woman, but that is irrelevant. My point here is when we talk about age, we have to make a distinction, and we have to discern age in ancient times, ancient kingdoms, and age nowadays. Now, with that being said, we will keep in mind that pederastry was then very different from pedophilia. Pedophilia, as in the act deprived of a relationship and perpetrated in order to hurt, damage morally, psychologically, emotionally a child, was considered very different from pederastry, which was instead the cultivation of a proper relationship, an emotional relationship of support between a younger guy, a free man, somebody who belonged to oligarchy, somebody who was trained and was being trained in the army, and I'm referring specifically to the Spartan army, and somebody who would at a certain point aspire to a bigger, higher role, and somebody that in that position would also become a mentor to somebody else, right? And that was instead appreciated instead of, like, again, mere acts, mere sexual acts that had different purposes, such as that of satisfaction of sexual desire. So in this type of relationships, right, you had one older guy who would teach. The teachings were not just restricted merely to how to fight, how to be positioned in a combat, but also they would extend to a bunch of different topics. So they were teachings on life, on manhood, on not just on how to fight. They were really mentor for life at that point, following some protocols, and now here we have to say that protocols in Sparta and protocols in Crete were less rigid than other places, but only at that point, just by following some protocols, the older and younger male could entertain a relationship, and that was pederastry. Such relationships were based on love and a certain degree of benevolence. So again, we'll repeat this one more time, not based only upon sex, but upon love, a certain form of love benevolence, affection, right, and other ingredients that are part of um, human relationships. Now, the backdrop to understand all of this is actually an important premise, and that is that relationships between men are not really judged, considered negatively by the ancient Greek society. The only thing that is really judged harshly, if you like, is the role that men can take in a relationship. In other words, to men, it is not allowed to be soft, to be effeminate, to be somewhat resembling a woman, and so to take on a passive role. This is about the passivity of a role that cannot be that of men. Yet, interestingly, actual boys, actual teenagers, could take on the role of the passive one in the couple just temporarily, because that was appropriate for their age. Then they would mature in and within that kind of society, would get married and would take up a definitely more active role in the couple with the wife. And so, as we mentioned at the beginning, there were certain rules that had to be respected, and that was full stop. First of all, no kid below the age of 12. Second of all, to the slaves was absolutely prohibited to enter the gym, at the time called gymnasium, because there free men oligarchs were training naked, and therefore that was a dangerous place for slaves to enter, because they had absolutely no power over the oligarchs of city-states like Sparta. In a city-state like that of Athens, things were slightly different, in a sense that the laws that regulated the relationships and the nature of the relationship between male individuals, those laws were indeed way more precise, if you like, and way more strict. For instance, they prescribed some sort of ritual of courtship. So the approach was not simply very, very much left to their fantasy, but there was some sort of protocol that would not lead to the dignity of the infant, of the child. So, of course, rules varied from city-state to city-state, but it was important for ancient Greeks not to degenerate into something else, meaning promiscuity, right? And then it was important to regulate homosexual relationships, right? Now, we know that the ancient Greeks were very open, if you like, way more open than what we are nowadays in certain parts of the world, very open to having homosexual relationships. And in that sense, we also know the stories of Sappho and the island of Lesbos, but we also know that Heracles, the strongest man according to the Greek mythology, he was surrounded by boyfriends. Therefore, the problem, the issue, if there was an issue here, was not actually having intercourse with men, but the role that would imply. So passivity versus active, or having a more active role in the relationship itself. And so from this standpoint, it's particularly interesting to actually assess the position that Plato has, the take that Plato has on homosexual relationships and homosexuality in general. So he goes from the years of his youth, when he was proclaiming that having an homosexual relationship is something extremely important, and that is in order to preserve somebody's legacy, somebody's a set of knowledge on life, and then is a non it's actually even more romantic. I wouldn't say that it's not romantic. I would say that it's even more romantic as a relationship than the one that the man will have with the wife, and more romantic because it's more based on love, if you like, and it's more based on sentimental affection between the parts involved. But then when Plato becomes older, he takes a different position. He says, no, these practices are degenerative and they mislead the youth of ancient Greece. The change in position that we see in Plato is quite interesting because it underscores some sort of change also in the position of wise and old people in ancient Greece. And therefore, we do know that ancient Greeks did not have anything particularly important, relevant against having a relationship between men, but we also know that those had to be regulated by protocols. Protocols would vary from one city to another and probably from one period to another. But then let's pay particular attention to the fact that that was actually translated also in the ancient Roman Empire. But here, homosexuality has a completely different nature. Relationships and intercourses between people of the same level, people of the same status quo, was not acceptable. The Romans only took the possibility of having relationships with inferior people, inferior to them, to their rank and whatnot. So we're talking about prostitutes, and we're talking about other slaves. And therefore, in the ancient Roman Empire, we witness relationships that are not between people of the same level, but again inferior, and that also means that that was merely an activity based off of the pleasure of at least one of the participants. Let's put it that way. So very different from the Greek one. And we have to wait the introduction, establishment of Christian canons for us to see punishment, for us to see a disapproval and an institutionalized rejection of pederastry and homosexuality. So now this is your turn to express your own comments and ideas, what you think of what we have discussed, what you think of pederastry and homosexuality in the ancient times. So don't forget to comment below. Let us know your opinion, what you think of this video, if we have missed something, if there is something you want us to discuss. Don't also forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment below, hit the notification bell to receive all the new updates. We'll talk some more next time with a new video. Bye!